if I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle sin is this, to smooth the rough touch with a gentle kiss.
Romeo and Juliet is known as the classic romance, the classic tragic couple. Over time, it's passed through hands, it's passed through classrooms, it's passed through movies and books and references. Like a huge game of telephone, since before Shakespeare, we've listened to this story. And like the game of telephone, we forgot what the original message is. It got lost under people repeating that Shakespeare was making fun of love, that this story is nothing but satire. How could it not be? Juliet is 13 years old. The play takes place over only 4 days, and Romeo starts the play in love with Rosaline. How could this be a serious love story? It's just a joke that people have confused for being a tragic play. In this video, I want to take us back to that original whisper in the game of telephone and talk about what Shakespeare was actually doing in the play, and why people believe that this is not a true love story. So I want to go through those 3 reasons for why people think it's a satire and actually tell you why they're in the play, and why those 3 things are used to show the fatal flaw of the characters. Did you know Shakespeare wasn't the first one to think of this couple? People have been writing about Romeo and Juliet since about 100 years before Shakespeare. And these characters may have been based off of real people, but we don't really know. Shakespeare scholars believe that he would have read Arthur Brooks and William Painters. So this was very normal at the time. This is not a James Somerton situation. Writers back then often stole or redone works that didn't belong to them. There was no copyright law, and this was very common practice. Shakespeare wrote a lot of plays based off of other stories and real people, but he did it in a way that set them apart from the originals. And he did this by genre bending. He used these well-known stories in order to do social commentary. A big difference between Brooke and Shakespeare's versions was that Brooke added in religious commentary to the prologue and added judgment to the couple. He was still more sympathetic towards them than the other versions, but Shakespeare wanted to leave all of that out in order for the audience to decide how they felt about the couple. Most of these other versions had Romeo and Juliet at around 18 years old. Brooke lowered it to 16 years old. Shakespeare made the conscious decision to make Juliet 13 and Romeo about 16 because he wanted them to be sympathetic. Keep in mind that this is making them sympathetic to an Elizabethan audience, not us. If we saw a movie today where a 13-year-old wanted to marry a 16-year-old in private, we would want to call the cops. The Elizabethan audience did not feel that way. To them, 13 is young enough to be worried about her and just barely old enough to believe that she could be married. In the play, she marries Romeo in private, while her father is making a deal with Paris to marry her to him. And while they make the deal for her to get married to Paris, they comment on her age because to the characters, this is concerning as well.
But now, my lord, what say you to my suit?
But saying o'er what I have said before, my child is yet a stranger in the world. Let 2 more summers wither in their pride, ere we may think her right to be a bride.
Younger than she are happy mothers made.
And too soon marred are those so early married. Woo her, gentle Paris. Get her heart! My will to her consent is but a part, and she agreed within her scope of choice lies my consent and fair according voice.
So Capulet is saying she's 13, she doesn't know anything yet. It'd be better to wait 2 years to marry her off, but I will let you pursue her. He's also saying that Juliet gets a little bit of a choice to follow her heart in this situation, but we can see in a scene later on that Capulet goes to Juliet and says, "You're getting married this week." When Juliet rejects this marriage offer, Capulet is not too pleased.
I tell you what, get thee to church Thursday, or never after look me in the face. And you be mine, I give you to my friend, and you be not hang, beg, starve, die in the streets. Just do it, bethink you, I am not be persuaded.
To answer, "I'll not be wed, I cannot love, I am too young, I pray you, pardon me. You shall not house with me." Capulet doesn't believe that her being young, which is her main argument against getting married to Paris, is a good enough reason for her to throw away this man. He does this because he believes that Paris is as good as she's gonna get. He's a very good nobleman with a good reputation and a lot of money. So this rejection is a spit in the face to Capulet. The point of having Juliet be so young is not to have you disregard her choices. It's to make you feel bad that she is stuck with such a hard choice. Paris or Romeo at such a young age. And that's how it would have been seen back then. I think some people don't understand how much agency Juliet has. She is a capital H hero. She is a tragic hero for this amount of agency. She is written so differently from all of Shakespeare's other heroines, and other heroines written by other people around that time. She talks about how much she wants to do it with Romeo. She is blasphemous. She actively pursues Romeo. She does a lot of shit behind her parents' back. She is determined and self-possessed, and she figures out how to get what she wants. And she does all this despite only being 13. So she's stuck between Paris and Romeo. Choosing Paris means that she's going to be a perfect Elizabethan woman, which means that she's going to listen to her father and be obedient. It is the safe option. Choosing Romeo means that she's listening to her own agency and being her own woman. Yes, she's going to be thrown out of her house, but she's listening to her gut and she's putting aside the family feud. And their marriage does end the family feud, which is Shakespeare suggesting that this was the right choice for her. And her agency and her intuition were correct. The tragic ending after her marriage does not suggest that she made the wrong choice, because that is to show her fatal flaw, which we'll get into later. So you have the father knowing it's wrong, but she can't get anyone better. Then you have the mom encouraging her because she was married and pregnant at Juliet's age.
Well, think of marriage now. Younger than you here in Verona, ladies of esteem are made already mothers. By my count, I was your mother, much upon these years that you are now a maid.
The play goes back and forth about whether or not Juliet should get married. But it's Juliet's decision, and she is burdened at the age of 13 to figure it out, and without the help of her parents. Her parents are shown to be borderline neglectful and cruel when Juliet isn't perfect.
Talk not to me, for I'll not speak a word. Do as thou wilt, for I have done with thee.
And you might think, well, at least she has the maid. But the maid fails her and encourages her to abandon Romeo, abandon this marriage contract she just entered into, and go with Paris and abandon her agency. And that's why the nurse doesn't get to know that her death was faked. Juliet is interesting for her self-possession, her determination, and her humor. She's actually really funny. She's clever and she's snooty. The play says she shouldn't be going through this because she's so young, but since she has to, it makes her more sympathetic. So Brooke's version, the one that Shakespeare took a lot of the plot from, took 90 days. Shakespeare condensed that plot into about 4 days for two main reasons. One, to feel rushed, and two, because of Aristotle. Aristotle was an ancient Greek philosopher and also the mentor to Alexander the Great. He also was a fan of theater, and he wrote the book on tragedies called Poetics. It's a 40-ish page book on what makes an effective tragedy and how to write better ones. In Poetics, Aristotle wrote about the unity of action, which just means that all actions should be logical and a result of an action that came before it. Renaissance writers ate up Poetics. They fucking loved him, and they also added some shit to his ideas. They created the three unities by adding location and time. The three unities were redefined in 1570 and referred to as the Aristotelian rules for dramatic structure. The unity of location just means that your play should take place in as few locations as possible. And the unity of time means that your play should take place in as short a time as possible. These principles, even though they were written in the Renaissance, show up a lot in ancient Greek plays and a lot of Renaissance plays. It was super common to have short plays. And of course, Shakespeare didn't listen to these unities for all of his plays, but for this one he did. I also don't hear this criticism for his other couples that got married even quicker than Romeo and Juliet. No one seems to have a problem taking their love seriously. Hero and Claudio in Much Ado About Nothing, Olivia and Sebastian in Twelfth Night. Almost every Shakespeare couple gets married immediately. The only ones that I think don't are Beatrice and Benedict, who have years of knowing each other and making fun of each other before they finally fall in love.
I wonder that you will still be talking, Signor Benedict. Nobody marks you.
Also, best couple. Romeo starts the play in love with Rosaline, and he is heartbroken over their breakup. She just dumped him because she didn't want to put out. Romeo is moping, he's being all romantic, and he's yearning, and he's being like a bummer. Mercutio, his best friend, takes him to a ball so he can get a rebound girl, but he ends up meeting Juliet there, the secret freak. The next day he goes to Friar Lawrence and says he's in love, and Friar Lawrence says, "Are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking stupid? Why? You were just in love with Rosaline. How could you do this?"
Was that with Rosaline?
Rosaline? My ghostly father, no. I have forgot that name, and that name's woe.
What a change is here. Is Rosaline, that thou didst love so dear, so soon forsaken? Young men's love, then, lies not truly in their hearts, but in their eyes.
Her I love now doth grace for grace and love for love allow. The other did not so.
As ye well knew. Thy love did read by rote, but could not spell. In one respect I'll thy assistant be. For this alliance may so happy prove, to turn your household's rancor to pure love.
Friar Lawrence roasts him for a second, but then ultimately agrees to marry him and Juliet, but only because it might solve the family feud. Right now, Friar Lawrence isn't taking their love seriously. He even says that, "Romeo, you know all the lovely, dramatic things to say, and you know how to flirt really well, but you don't actually know the meaning of those words." And he's right at this point in the play, but Romeo will understand how complicated love is and the gravity of his choices by the end of the play. It's called a character arc. What he had with Rosaline wasn't love because she didn't love him back. Friar Lawrence points out in this scene that Romeo wasn't loving her, he was doting on her.
Now chides me off for loving Rosaline.
For doting, not for loving, pupil mine.
And doting means that you're obsessed with someone in a very superficial way. Juliet is different than Rosaline because she loves him back. She pursues him. She screams at the sun to go away so it can be nighttime so she can get him in her bed. This play uses Rosaline at the beginning to show the difference between doting and loving, not to show that Romeo is just really fickle. Friar Lawrence also warns them that rushing into things will ruin them.
Let us hence, I stand on sudden haste.
Wisely and slow, they stumble that run fast.
He warns them of this multiple times throughout the play. Her being 13, it being 4 days, and Rosaline being there at the beginning are all things that the Elizabethan audience would have been uncomfortable with because it shows Romeo and Juliet rushing. So why do they rush through when they're being warned so much not to do these things? Before Shakespeare, there's Petrarch. He popularized Italian or Petrarchan sonnets, and Shakespeare would have rathered him not. These sonnets and their language and their tropes and their cliches were the standard for depicting love at the time. Petrarchan sonnets were written by men towards women who they couldn't have, and they were really dramatic and sad about it. They used hyperbole, paradoxes, they idealized the woman, making her into a goddess. They objectified her and obsessed over her. And they all used the same group of tropes, and one of the most popular ones was dying for love. The women written about were often nameless and voiceless and had no agency or desire of their own. They did not participate with the poet, they just kind of stood there and were talked about. Dying for love was all the rage. Without her love, your life is not worth living, and how romantic is that? Oh, I'll just jump off a cliff because she doesn't want me. Doesn't that make her want me? Shakespeare popularized Shakespearean or English sonnets where he usually made fun of Petrarchan tropes. He used them to show how unrealistic they were and how stupid the language they used was. The best example of this is in Shakespeare's sonnet, "My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun," and if you want to see me break down that poem, you can check out this video. In Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare takes the attitude, the tropes, and the language of Petrarchan sonnets, turns them into reality, and shows how they are unrealistic and really fucking stupid. He does this to make the audience rethink how love is depicted, and what they assumed love was. And that's why the things people make fun of about this play are in the play, because Shakespeare was also making fun of them. When I was describing Petrarchan sonnets, did that remind you of anyone in this play? Because I don't know about you, but it sounds a lot like Romeo.
Why then, O brawling love, O loving hate, O anything of nothing first create?
Romeo's the classic lovesick trope with all the cliches of Petrarchan sonnets. Shakespeare's audience would have picked up that he was voicing Petrarchan ideas immediately because Petrarchan tropes were kind of everywhere. They would have liked him too. He'd like nothing wrong with him, he's fine, but they would have seen him as a guy who just needed to get a grip. And that's what Mercutio and Friar Lawrence are for. Mercutio is Romeo's best friend and complete opposite. Romeo loves love and Mercutio thinks women are just for sex. Romeo is deeply feeling and Mercutio turns everything into a dick joke. But these two guys are equally as dramatic. Mercutio is the source of all comedy in the play. He's there to point out how stupid Romeo sounds and ground him back to reality. Their comic and tragic natures end up creating a lot of the comedy and tension within the play. The audience would have loved Mercutio for not taking Romeo's love seriously. And I want to be pretty clear. Mercutio is making fun of Romeo because Mercutio does not believe in love, not because Romeo is not in love. Mercutio is making fun of the language. Mercutio literally mentions Petrarch by name in this passage.
Now is he for the numbers that Petrarch flowed in. Laura to his lady was a kitchen wench. Marry, she had a better love to berhyme her. Dido, a dowdy, Cleopatra, a gypsy, Helen, hero, Hildings and harlots. Thisbe a grey eye also, but that's not to the purpose.
Romeo seriously loves Juliet. That part is fact. But his Petrarchan outlook on love is what leads to his tragic ending. It is that outlook that Shakespeare is trying to poke holes in. Friar Lawrence is the straight man and the most rational character. If they had listened to him, nothing bad would have happened. And the way these characters trauma dump on him and just roll around on the floor with snot bubbles, like he has nothing better to do. Like he wasn't just fucking gardening. And Friar Lawrence always tells everyone the exact same thing. Calm down. Shakespeare undoes the image of the voiceless, nameless, unrequited love through Juliet. When the couple meet, they perform a sonnet together, essentially about making out. Sonnets are a strict form. They are 3 quatrains with 1 rhyming couplet at the end, always equaling 14 lines. The rhyme scheme is A, B, A, B until the couplet. They are 10 syllables a line and use iambic pentameter. Romeo and Juliet go back and forth in order to create the sonnet together. Romeo. If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle sin is this. My lips, 2 blushing pilgrims, ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss. Juliet, good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much. Which mannerly devotion shows in this? For saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss. Romeo, have not saints lips and holy palmers too? Juliet, I, pilgrim, lips that they must use in prayer. Romeo, oh then, dear saint, let lips do what hands do. They pray, grant thou, lest faith turn to despair. Juliet, saints do not move, though they grant for prayer's sake. Romeo, then move not while my prayer's effect I take. So in the sonnet, he is doing what Petrarchan sonnets do, which is idealizing a woman. He is saying that she is a holy saint that people pilgrimage to. But Juliet grounds herself. She is taking herself out of that idealization. She talks about how saints and pilgrims are on the same level as their palms touch. She is rejecting the sonnet, and she is rejecting her role within it. After the sonnet, they kiss, and she says, "You kiss by the book." She's calling him boring in like a fun, flirty way. Shakespeare does this to say, hey, isn't it cool when the person you love loves you back? Isn't it cool when the woman gets to also participate in this creation of love? Doesn't that seem like more fun and like way hotter? Doesn't this seem more real than an incel crying on himself because this woman he doesn't know doesn't love him? Oh no, it's almost as if the unknown beloved has something to offer in love and art. Poets at the time said, wouldn't it be super sexy cool if I died for love right now? Shakespeare said, okay, but let me show you what that would look like. In the beginning half of the play, dying for love is a cute, sweet, fun idea. Characters say it to show their devotion, not to actually threaten to do it.
If they do see thee, they will murder thee.
I have night's cloak to hide me from their eyes. But thou love me. Let them find me here. My life were better ended by their hate than death prorogued wanting of thy love.
This is what the audience was used to seeing. This was a very typical representation of love. But then halfway through the play, Tybalt and Mercutio actually die. and death is now actually in the play. The tone has shifted, and since our comic character Mercutio is gone, all the laughter has stopped in the play. After this scene, when characters talk about dying for love, they mean it. It's a threat now.
Oh, be not, Father, that thou hearest of this, unless thou tell me how I may prevent it.
Frames me past the compass of my wits.
If in thy wisdom thou canst give no help, do thou recall my resolution wise, and with this I'll help it presently.
Hold, daughter!
Be not so long to speak, I long to die!
Friar Lawrence tries to calm her shit down and tries to make death seem harmless again like it did in the beginning half of the play. He says, fake your death and I will get you to Romeo. But it's not gonna work. The play is already running straight for its tragic ending. The couple dies for love, and it's tragic. The families put up statues of Romeo and Juliet after Friar Lawrence explains that they were in love. Those statues stand as a reminder of what could have been. Watching this play, especially as an Elizabethan audience, you're thinking, wow, a coffin actually isn't that romantic. It would have been nicer if instead of statues, they were really here still. Shakespeare is pointing out that love does not work the way sonnets say they do. There's another character in this play that dies for love, and that's Paris. While Juliet is still asleep, Paris goes to say goodbye. Romeo comes in, and Paris thinks that since he's a Montague, he must be here to disrespect her grave. So Paris fights him and dies.
I am slain. If thou be merciful, open the tomb. Lay me with Juliet.
He ends up being taken down for a woman that didn't even want him, who was already married, and it's such a waste of life. It's such a stupid way to go out, and most of us don't even remember that that happens to Paris. It's such a dumb thing to do. When Romeo holds her lifeless body, he talks about how she still looks full of life.
Death that hath sucked the honey of thy breath hath had no power yet upon thy beauty. Thou art not conquered. Beauty's ensign yet is crimson in thy lips and in thy cheeks, and death's pale flag is not advanced there.
She wakes up right after he dies from drinking the poison, and then she uses that happy dagger, and it's supposed to feel like they were so close. It's supposed to hurt how close they were to their happy ending. And I've heard a lot of complaints about this scene. They're so dumb for not waiting. How am I supposed to take this seriously? It's not a tragedy. It's supposed to be funny that they almost live. Shakespeare's almost rubbing it in their faces. I'm here to point out that them being so close to living is how tragedies work. This scene makes this play a tragedy by both ancient Greek and Renaissance metrics. Going back to Aristotle's Poetics, tragedies don't just mean it's sad or people get hurt. That is the territory of the genre, but that is not what defines the genre. Aristotle says that a tragic hero is someone who is not the greatest, not the worst. They start at an okay point in life, and then the play is about the downfall of their situation or their soul. We watch their life go up in flames because of their fatal flaw and their bad choices. It didn't have to be this way is the main message of tragedies. Heroes are not saints, but their suffering are caused less by innate wickedness than because of hamartia, or error. Hamartia is the failing in understanding or moral character which leads someone to a disastrous choice of action. A choice which arouses our pity because it is both catastrophic and made deliberately, but not out of wickedness, and arouses our helplessness of the person who makes the choice. That feeling of why couldn't they have just waited? And feeling helpless is the feeling of tragedies. You're not supposed to get to the end of a play called The Most Lamentable Tragedy of Romeo and Juliet without feeling a little bit of discomfort. He wasn't joking when he titled it that. A creator on TikTok that I really love said that when people try to rationalize tragedies and they try to say things like, well, I can't take that ending seriously because they should have just waited. It's because they don't feel comfortable feeling the feelings of a tragedy. And that feeling at the end is the point of tragedies. It's called catharsis. You're meant to be moved by the end of a tragedy. It's supposed to release all these pent-up feelings of sadness and pity and helplessness and discontent. It's supposed to like dredge all of them up, and you're supposed to experience it with the characters. That's why you go to see something sad. Pity and terror can be aroused by what happens on stage, but the better authors are, the more they arrange the mythos to produce these reactions. Since the author's task is to arouse by imitation the satisfaction of feeling pity and terror, the ability to do so must be inherent in the incidences of the play. Play ends this way because Romeo and Juliet made choices because of their fatal flaw. Romeo and Juliet both have the same fatal flaw, and they've been warned that they do throughout the whole play. Her being 13, it being 4 days, and Romeo being in love with Rosaline are all signs of the same fatal flaw, and that is that they rush. Friar Lawrence warns them.
These violent delights have violent ends, and in their triumph die like fire and powder, which as they kiss consume. The sweetest honey is loathsome in its own deliciousness, and in the taste confounds the appetite. Therefore, love moderately.
But this couple can't love moderately and can't slow down because they are reflective of Petrarchan Sonnets. And Petrarchan Sonnets are written about volatile, fast, extreme love. Moderate love was not the subject of sonnets ever. Shakespeare is saying good things can turn into bad things when you rush and when you mishandle them. Love is complicated. Life is complicated. Petrarchan Sonnets have a shit way of handling these things, and if you follow it, it will never lead you to a happy ending. So some people are right. Shakespeare is making fun of love, but he's only making fun of certain depictions of love. And he isn't saying that they aren't in love by doing this. It's a tragedy and not a comedy because he's showing us a good couple, a loving couple, one that could have been really happy together, and he's showing us them being ruined by sonnet tropes. If it was a comedy, then we would laugh by the end and they wouldn't have been a great couple together. And there are things in the text that show us that Romeo and Juliet would have been a really great couple together. They would have helped each other mature and grow. They both have to make a choice in this play about how they want to live and how they want to grow up. We already talked about Juliet's choice being between Paris and Romeo, her agency or her obedience. Romeo's journey is what type of man he wants to be, and honestly this can be a whole video on its own. There's a lot to say about this storyline. He has to choose whether or not he wants to be his father, who is carrying on the family feud and hatred and toxic masculinity, or he can redefine himself through Juliet's love and leave all of that behind.
Wherefore art thou, Romeo? Deny thy father, and refuse thy name. Or if thou wilt not, be but sworn my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet.
And he says, yeah, I'll do whatever you want. I'm yours. Let's do this. But what pains us is that he doesn't follow through with what he said. His fatal flaw of rushing and being volatile ends up distancing him from Juliet because he kills Tybalt, which means that he's doubling down on his name and the family feud. It starts him back down his father's path, and maybe he could have gotten off of it again in banishment with Juliet by his side, but we don't know. So their love isn't the issue. The issue is that they are stupid teenagers and they don't know how to handle their love. They don't know how to handle the family feud. They fumble it through their fatal flaw and they make bad decisions for understandable reasons. Romeo and Juliet are in love and they are a good couple. If you don't believe me, read the play. I've also included further reading in my description that came from my anthology. It's very hard for modern audiences to understand Shakespeare plays. We try to look at those plays how we look at art today. In university, when I learned how to read Shakespeare, we didn't start with him. We had to learn the history of England, what the people were fighting for, what they were scared of, what the plague did to theater, story tradition and genre conventions around the time, what writing practices were popular in other playwrights around his time, what wasn't allowed to be shown on stage, and how patrons dictated what could go into plays. Learning all that stuff was the only way the play made sense. Shakespeare was a bit of a troll, and he loved adding social commentary into his plays. Social commentary that would make no sense to us today. He loved taking popular tropes at the time and subverting them or twisting them in ways. And we didn't even know that those tropes existed. I could make 100 videos on Shakespeare and go on forever. I will say this video is a little bit hard to cite because I've been reading Shakespeare since I was 13, and everything from this video is kind of an amalgamation of everything I've learned for the last 12 years. I'm kind of just telling you what the play is, what the play was about. It's not really my ideas. I'm kind of just telling you about history. This is what I know from taking Shakespeare courses, sonnet sequence courses, history courses, poetry courses. This is my channel where I talk about everything writing, and sometimes I analyze things. Check out the links in my bio if you like what I'm doing, and you can also check out my Patreon. I have exclusive videos every month. Okay, I can't wait for all the comments to be about how Shakespeare didn't write his own shit. Fuck my life.
Slip-a-dip-dip. I hate him so much.